I learned lessons the hard way. I'd make mistakes, and then I have to like clean up messes and figure it out. And then I look back and I go, duh, like the signs were always there. And I only write from my biggest emotions. I don't go into a room and just go, oh, let's write a song today. I write in the middle of the night because something woke me up.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis podcast with Chip Conley.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis and my episode with Michael Franti, the award-winning musician who just so happens to be my friend and has been my friend for 37 years. I love this guy, but he has been going through his midlife chrysalis lately. And this was recorded at the MEA campus in Santa Fe just before he was about to go to the funerals of both his adopted mother and his birth mother within a few days after a workshop we did with him. I hope you'll enjoy it. It's a very poignant and emotional episode. I think it will prove that on the other side of the chrysalis is a butterfly just waiting to break out.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Chip Conley podcast.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's usually you getting the hand. So let's talk just a little bit about your process of maturing from your early adult years up until the present day.
Yeah.
And let's do it in about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And try to capture just the highlights. What are the highlights that took you there?
When I was in high school, I became fluent in Spanish 1 because I took it 3 times. And I had this teacher named Marty Arnold, who's an amazing person and great, kind of the time in my life when I needed somebody really great. And we all had to give ourselves a Spanish name in the class, and so my name, was Michael. So I was like Miguelito, but she changed it to Mosquito because I was so annoying to her. But she used to always say, we'd go around the room and, sometimes she'd ask questions you had to answer in Spanish, So when she got to me, she goes, Miguelito, what are you going to do if you grow up? And I feel like that's been the story of my life. Like,
it's still an if.
It's still an if. What I mean by that is I learn lessons the hard way. Like I'd make mistakes. I do stupid shit. And then I have to clean up messes and figure it out. And then I look back and I go, duh, like the signs were always there. And that's the story of my trying to be mature. Yeah.
So it's not an if, maybe it's a when.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the when is now, yes. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
In particular.
I mean, there's been many whens along the way. So. Yeah.
So since the age of 35, let's move it from there forward, because I believe midlife starts at 35 and goes to 75. Now I know that's some people make fun of that, but if you're going to live to 100, I promise you that midlife goes to 75. So, Michael, since 35, what's a transition or two that you've gone through that had a huge impact on you in such a way that you became wiser as a result of it? Because I deeply believe that our painful life lessons, often in transition, are the raw material for our future wisdom. So what are some transitions you went through from 35 on that had a huge, indelible wisdom fingerprints impact on you?
One of them was as an artist and a songwriter, I was invited to perform in Folsom Prison 37 years after Johnny Cash had performed there. And we were the first artist to perform there after him. So I'm there and I'm singing these songs that are, like outspoken political songs and songs speaking out against the prison industrial complex and things that I've written that I'm really passionate about in the world. And it was Thanksgiving, which is the hardest day in any prison besides Christmas, because people miss
family.
Yeah. And so at the end of it, these guys were up dancing and singing and cheering, and this guy comes to me and goes, Michael, I've been in prison for 22 years. This is the first time I've heard any live music. And we were in a chapel about this size, and he said, there's no windows though. And he said, for 2 hours, these walls just disappeared. And he said, but I really wish you would have sung one song about how much I miss my family. I really wish you would have sung one song about how much I miss my family. And I was just like, like, I totally missed the mark here. I thought I was coming in to like say stuff that about the world and about prison, and I ended up feeling like I learned more than I gave to them. You know, from that moment, I was like, I don't want to just be a voice for, you know, social activism, although I believe in it very strongly. I want to be a voice for how people get through life and can show up for all of the things that they have to activate in their life, be it their relationships, be it as parents, as in their workplace, holding on to the values that they do in the world. And when it's time to go on the street to raise your voice, you do that also. But you have to, I learned that it's important to write songs about the full rainbow of human experience. And, you know, when I was making lots in my early years that you've known, been there, and writing, you know, angry political punk rock and hip hop music.
This is when we talked last night about, this is when we met.
Yeah. Sometimes I'd go out on stage and I'd be at some, you know, hippie festival, and I'd be like, fuck the system, you know, and there'd be like hippies like dancing and naked and throwing ice at each other, you know. I'd be
They were
kind of like,
tripping. They were tripping.
And I'm kind of like, I actually feel more like dancing naked and throwing ice than I do about like raging against the machine. I learned that it was important to express the full rainbow of human emotion. And there was one song in particular. It was in the early 90s. And, you know, we had a lot of friends who died from AIDS in San Francisco, especially in the arts and the music community. And people who not only lost their life, but along the way lost their families. When their families found out, they ran. And it was this horrible, horrible, you know, tragic time. And so I kept thinking to myself, I need to write a song about this. And so the first song that I wrote was like, fuck the government, fuck the system, because they're not responding to this crisis. And then a little while later, I went to go get an HIV test because I'd fallen in love, and I wanted to, before I slept with this woman, I wanted to make sure that I didn't have HIV, because it was like who I slept with, who they slept with, who they slept with, you know. And back then, you used to have to wait. You get your blood drawn, and then you had to wait like 10 days before the test came back, and then they would mail you the result. So every day I would go to like the mailbox, or you could go in and you could sit with a counselor, but I was just like, send it to me, you know. So I was waiting every day, and finally this test comes, and like during the time that I was waiting, I was thinking, you know, of all the times that I'd had unprotected sex, of people that I'd been around with, the one night stands I'd had, all these things, and was living in this like state of dread before the test results, you know. And I said, this is actually what this song is about what this crisis is about for me. And it might be something different for other people, but for me, this is what it's about. So I wrote a song that was about getting tested and waiting for the results to come back. When I put the song out, I was nervous because, you know, people weren't talking about that. But what happened was that people would come to me with their own stories, you know, after they heard the song. And people came to me and they were like, I've been kind of like dreading getting tested, but you know, your song gave me like some courage, you know, some inspiration. And I found that there was power in expressing what made me vulnerable, and that two things happened when I would put it out in the song. Number one, I felt better, like giving voice to whatever it is that was hurting me. But then secondly, when I saw it land in somebody else, it was like, I don't feel alone. And then suddenly they don't feel alone. I was in fourth grade, and I heard this song by the Silvers. I can't remember the title right now, but it's like, my name is Michael. I run. Remember that song?
Yes.
Nickel, shiny and blue. I want to do it. And I'm like, oh my God, they wrote a song about me and Sally Pinkner in fourth grade. This is like everything that, you know, in the song, because I couldn't talk to my parents about this crush I had. But in the song, it was like they were talking right at me, right to me, like they were there. They wrote it literally about me. And that's the power of like sharing stories, you know. And it's not just in music, it's in all aspects of life, how when we share our stories with each other, we see each other for who we are. And there's a real power in that. There's intimacy in that. And there's a strength in that. When we're able to hear someone's story, it's the greatest gift in the world, I believe, to be able to hear someone intimately share their deepest secrets, or maybe just something that happened in that day or something in their life. It's the greatest gift that you can do, to listen to somebody, because that's what most people need, is just to be heard. So if you're not sharing your story, you're denying other people of being able to give you the greatest gift. Yeah. It took me a long time to learn that one. We're talking about that.
So what's interesting, Michael, is that you are a bit of an anomaly in the sense that your greatest commercial success has happened almost with each decade.
Yeah.
It's like each decade it gets a little bit better. So your 20s was a little bit niche, and then you go 30s, then 40s, and yesterday you turned 59, and we celebrated a little bit here, and yet your 50s, at a time in an industry that seems to prize youth, you have come into your own in classic midlife in your 50s.
Yeah.
So why do you think that is? Is it because of the fact that you are expressing yourself much more vulnerably and in a way that everybody can relate, or is there something else?
I think it has a lot to do with it, and I'm always trying to find something new. It's like what you always talk about: curiosity is the elixir of life.
Yeah.
When I'm approaching a new record or a new song, I'm always trying to take that first idea that came to me, and then use the palette of voices. Be it guitar, drums, bass, some electronic instrument, or maybe it's just a cappella, maybe it's an orchestra, whatever it is. But I'm using that palette to make the sound of the feeling. And it always comes out differently, because that feeling is, like you describe in your book, Emotional Equations. Feelings are complicated.
They are.
They're very complex. And so when you have music, it's like a score to a film. Sometimes in a film, you'll see a guy standing in the corner smiling, and you hear, da-na-na. And you're like, okay, some shit's about to go down, versus he's smiling and you hear, it's a whole different thing. So when you write a song, it's like you have these words, but then you have this music that scores it, that draws the emotion out. And sometimes the more that you add to it, the less the initial thing is there. And so when you're asking about like maturity in songwriting, it's like learning what is only essential to be there and nothing more, cutting away and stripping away.
So that's wisdom.
Yeah.
Because, knowledge is adding, accumulating, plus.
Yeah.
Wisdom is distilling down the essential.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a big part of it. Another part of it is I only write from my biggest emotions. I don't go into a room and just go, oh, let's write a song today. I write in the middle of the night because something woke me up, or I just had a melody and I was sitting on the toilet or something. And then I grab it, I sing it into my phone, and then I will go later that day or the next day or something and flesh it out till it's done. And then another big piece for me has been collaboration. I always thought that if I collaborated in writing a song, that somehow it would be less personal. But what I found is that I don't always have words to what I'm feeling. It's really, there's sometimes when I do and I get it right and I nail it, but I know what I'm feeling, but I can't exactly find the words, or I can't find the chords that are going to be the right ones. So I'll go to somebody else that I know and trust, or sometimes somebody new who I just like their songs, and I'll say, what do you think? I wrote this thing, and do you have a third line? Because I like this first two lines, but I need something that helps it to land a little bit harder when the third line comes in. And then they'll say, hey, I do. I have this thought, and then I'll go, oh, that's really great, and it's 80% there. Let's pull on those two other words and let's figure it out, And then we get there, and it ends up being, really close to what I was feeling, as opposed to it just being a half-finished song that never got done. So collaboration is a really big thing.
It's interesting in the music industry, unlike a lot of other industries, there's a lot of intergenerational collaboration. You know, Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett, was that who she, I think she sang, and then all the other ones. I mean, have you had any intergenerational collaboration along the way?
Yes. I'm just trying to think of who right now.
Or who would, or here's a better question.
Yeah.
Let's say you're Michael 20 years from now, you're 79 years old. Who's somebody who's an up and comer today that you would like to collaborate with, either today or 20 years from now?
Like up and comer today. You know, it's really hard for me to say it like that because my collaborations mostly come from friendships. Okay. Like I meet somebody backstage or something like that, and then we become friends, and then we write something together. Or I have friends that I've written with for many years, and who will call me with an idea or something like that. So it's really hard to think. But in terms of that, like, there's a skill to songwriting that takes time to learn. And the only way that you do it, the only way that you learn it is by doing it. There's some people who come up with like a hit song their first time, and then they have a really hard time writing more hit songs because they haven't practiced the craft of writing a song. And the craft of writing a song comes from being able to, and this is just my way of explaining it, it comes from being able to grab onto these ideas as they're occurring and taking the first thing that comes and knowing that and trusting that's the purest thing. And if it felt good to you, or if it felt something to you, it made you feel angry, made you cry, it made you whatever, then that is like a pure thing that you can then shape into, you know, a 3-minute song.
So part of the process of being creative is to be this vessel such that the genie comes through you.
Yeah,
this is
just to be open.
Liz Gilbert talks about that. She says, no one's got genius. We just have the ability to channel the genie. Yeah. And it's your job is to actually just channel that genie. And over the course of time, your capacity to channel the genie has probably improved or broadened. You know, and so part of your mindset, if we're going to talk about mindset today here at MEA, is going to be, how does your mindset shift in terms of what kind of musician you are? You know, it's a hard one. You're a hard one to characterize. Yeah. People say like, oh, Michael Franti, what kind of music does he play? Like, I don't know what to say because it's happy music, but it didn't used to be happy music. Yeah. And it's love music, and it used to be sad music. And it's sad music sometimes, and then sometimes it's like, oh, it's sort of beach music. Well, it's beach music because it's the kind of music you can play on a beach and hang out by a campfire. Yeah. But how do we describe Michael Franti's music?
I actually thought you did a really good job.
So it's hard to categorize you. Yeah. You're a man, you're a person, a human who has both a black father and a white mother. Yeah. Has a mother who was your birth mother. And then you got adopted. Mm-hmm. She gave you up, and both of your mothers, your adopted mother and your birth mother, both just passed recently. Mm-hmm. And within the next 8 days, you're going to both of their funerals. So you are a hard to categorize guy. And how does that make it life easier or harder? Or
both. I think, you know, like for the industry, it makes it hard because they're like, oh, there's R&B stations and there's alternative stations and there's and there's genres, and I hate genres because music is, like I said, it's the sound of feeling. And what genre is a feeling, you know? And there are multiple genres, and there are mixes, and there are highs and lows, and there are ups and downs, and they change inside you, not day by day or year by year, but moment by moment. And so it's really difficult to describe what that is. But I also feel like my greatest strength is that I've been able to not metamorphosize and like consciously evolve, but I've just followed my musical whims, you know, and wherever they took me, I was when I first started, I was making metal with the beatniks. I mean, music with the beatniks, that was all metal. Like we were not heavy metal guitars. We were banging on pieces of metal.
Yeah, no, and I know.
I know. And then with the Disposable Heroes, we were using like samplers and drum machines, but we were combining all those metal sounds that we were sampling and putting into it.
It was a little easier to dance to.
Little bit easier beat to dance to. Yeah. And then eventually along the way, I picked up a guitar because I wanted to play music anywhere. I wanted something that I could carry on a street corner. And where that came from was I was invited to Cuba to play in this collaboration with 25 Cuban artists and 25 American and European artists. And so one night we were at this table, all 50 of us were sitting around this big, long picnic tables. And, there was bottles of Havana rum being passed around and Cuban cigars were being smoked. And everybody would take the guitar and pass it to the next person and sing a song. And there was like, Gladys Knight would sing a song. And then Michelle Ndegeocello was there and Mick Fleetwood would sing a song. And then, and there's all these incredible artists that were there, Peter Frampton would sing a song. And then the guitar came to me and I flipped it over because I only knew how to rap at that time. And I tried to make a beat on like hip, hop, a hibbity, a hibbity. And it wasn't that great, to be honest, I could probably do it better now, but it was not that good. And I was embarrassed, in front of these icons of music. And I was like, holy shit, I will never be caught in this situation again. So I went home and I bought a guitar and I put it in the corner of my room and I waited for a year and a half. And I somehow thought that the guitar would mysteriously learn all my songs. And one day I'd just pick it up and it would play all my songs for me without ever having practiced. And so it just sat there for a while. And so then when I was at this, the Trinity Tribal Stomp Festival in Northern California. And at the end of the night, there was this teepee, and I go into the teepee, and there's all these people in there, and they're like, they had just seen me perform on stage with my band, and they're like, hey, Michael, come sit around the campfire and play us a song, we're swapping. And again, I pick up the guitar, and I'm like, and I was like, I got to do this. And so I went to a friend's house who was
How old are you at this point?
I was about, you said 35, okay. Right around that time. Mm-hmm. And I'd been making records and so I, maybe 30. Mm-hmm. But I was well into make a career of making music and selling records and touring. And so I went and I found a really great place to learn to play guitar, which is the front porch of a weed grower's house in Willits, California.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a guitar and he invited me up there for the weekend. And we made burritos and smoked way too much weed. And I sat there on the front porch and I just would go. And eventually it started to become a little bit more natural. Emily from the Indigo Girls was the person who taught me my first guitar chord. She was like, this is the G chord.
She was a regular at the Phoenix, my first hotel.
Yeah. So I played the guitar and I was like, I could do this. And then I started to put my voice to it, and it was like, I just like ever so timidly trying to match my sound of my voice of hitting the notes of whatever's in the chord. Because up to that point, I was still just rapping. I wasn't singing. And Carl, who's the bass player in my band, who's been a friend of mine for 30 years, he used to work at one of your hotels.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He would go into the studio with me and he'd stay up all night and we'd be in there till 4 a.m. going, he'd go, Mike, play that note. He played on piano. He'd go, Mike, play this note. And I'd go, oh, that's it. And he'd go to the next one. And I go, and then I finally get it. And he trained me how to distinguish the notes and how to sing them. And it wasn't easy for me. It was not an easy transition into doing that. But what I found after that was it opened up this whole new vocabulary of songwriting and of musicality and the power of melody. And I remember when in the Disposable Heroes, we had this song called Television, the Drug of the Nation.
Oh, yeah.
Which is this big,
good one,
really intense rant about the evils of television. And it was heard by U2, we were on Island Records at that time. And so U2 wanted to use our song to open up their Zoo TV tour because it was the first tour to have the massive video screens. And so they would start the show, the lights would go black, and then my face would come on these giant screens going, television, the drug of the nation, you know, and like doing this hardcore rap about, you know. And then they would walk out. But then when they would sing, Bono would just like, he'd sing, yo, or still haven't found what I'm looking for. And they'd go, because they like all the words weren't landing, but the melody was.
Yeah.
And I learned that that's the real power is in the melody. Like you're in the dentist office and you hear the jingle of a song and you go, you know, dun, 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 you know, like, or whatever the melody is, you know, if I said dun, 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 sunny day, sweeping, like people know that, then you remember that part of it. So there's power in melody.
So there's a rhythm, and you remember a person for their rhythm, you remember music for its rhythm.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Bono for a second. Yeah. So Bono was a bit of a modern elder for you because he's a few years older than you. Yeah. What did you learn from him?
I was telling you yesterday this story. Well, there's a couple of really good stories with Bono. The first one is when we first started the tour, I was a fan, but not like a super fan. Like I knew their music, I liked it, and I appreciated it. But they had gone from being, you know, it was kind of this underground, hip, indie kind of thing, but to suddenly like exploding when they came up with the Joshua Tree album. So everybody knew them. But I didn't, and we were invited on the tour. So after the first like couple days of the tour, Bono comes up and he's like, "Hey, Michael." I go, yeah. He goes, "Can I have a quiet word with you?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, like what have I done?" Like, you know, and he goes, "Well, I love your band, man. The shows have been great, but there's just this one thing. I've got to bring it up to you." And I was like, "What is it?" He goes, "You know my guitar player?" And he goes, I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "His name is The Edge, not Ed." So like, I guess, you know, the first week of the tour, it's like, "Yo, Ed, nice sneakers. Yo, Ed, like that hat. Yo, Ed, great guitar solo." And maybe it was enough that like, somebody
you learned that thing, okay.
So that was one thing. Another thing was one day Bono came up to me and we were talking about, you know, he was playing in these giant stadiums, and I was used to playing in little punk rock clubs that weren't even this big. And I said, "You know, what's it like, you know, having gone from, you know, being, you know, kind of cult band status to suddenly being the biggest fan in the world?" He goes, "You know, the thing about it is that I am so insecure that I need 70,000 people to tell me how much they love me every night just to feel okay." And there was something in me that felt that exact same way. You know, I have a kid from adoption who, from my birth, I felt like I was unwanted.
Yeah.
And recently I had a really major, you know, as we're talking about midlife edits, a big one for me is that I've always thought of my biological mother as in many different stories in my childhood of her in my head. One of the stories was that when the Franti, my mother who raised me, was pissed off at me or something, or they were fighting or there was drunkenness in our house, I would go into my room and I would say, "You know, somewhere there's this woman who really loves me, my real mom. She must really love me." And then I would go, "But if she really loved me, why did she give me away? So she must hate me." And then I'd say, "Well, maybe she was just like really young and she couldn't have me." And then I would say, maybe she was an addict. Maybe there was, you know, some other thing in her life that led her to not being able to feel like she could raise me." And I told myself all these stories over and over again in my head growing up. And finally, when my first son was conceived, I was 20 years old. And so I searched for 2 years to find my biological mom. And when I did, I found out that none of those stories were true. Not any of them. That in fact, my mom was 29, that she had been working on her master's degree at UC Berkeley, and she later went on to become a PhD researcher at Harvard Medical School, that she wasn't broke, that the reason that she gave me up is she had met my father at a conference, and they became immediately infatuated with each other. I don't know if it was that night, but at some point they conceived me. She was madly in love with him, but he had 3 children and a wife that he was separated from, and was on the other side of the country. And they had talked about maybe he'll join, but in the end he said, I just can't leave my family that's here and come all the way to the West Coast where my mom was. So she was heartbroken. My wife right now is 8 months pregnant. And just the other day I was sitting on the couch with her, and she's, just going through some hard stuff with pregnancy. And I saw her, and I saw my mom, and I put my hand on Sarah's belly, and I just broke down like uncontrollable tears, because I saw the real story of what was going on with my mom was that she was giving birth to me at a time when she was absolutely heartbroken. And the reason was because her father was so racist that she felt he would never accept a brown baby. So here she is carrying me all this time, heartbroken from my father not being there, heartbroken from her father being whoever he was, to the point where she felt that the very best opportunity that she could give me would be to give me away. And then there I am, as an infant, held by my mom for 1 hour, and then given to a nurse who pops a bottle in my mouth, puts me in an incubator, and then I'm in incubators and bottles and passed around from one nurse to the next for I don't know how long, until I ended up in a foster home for a couple months. Maybe I'm thinking of this baby like finally locking eyes with the same person for more than 1 hour at a time. And then I was there for 2 months before I was adopted. So like all this time, like this little infant is being kind of like never bonding with anybody. And that became part of my life. Like I never felt like I belonged, never felt like I fit in. So at this point in my life, I was, like I said, I'm there in absolutely uncontrollable tears, just sobbing. And finally I said, Mom, forgive me for being this son that could never embrace you, could never, I always felt like,
because you got to know her later in life.
I got to meet her,
yeah,
but I never really connected with her. And part of it was that I was still holding on to these stories of when I was a kid. And the stories that I told myself as a kid, I needed those stories to protect me. I had, as a little kid, I'm trying to rationalize in my head why my drunk father is screaming at my mom. And in my room, I'm telling myself, somewhere there's a mother who loved me. And in that moment, it protected me. But when I met her at age 22, it wasn't protecting me anymore. And it was keeping me from embracing her. And she had this real deep pain of then giving up this child and then never being able to share it with anybody. Like she couldn't talk to her family about it. I know she talked to a few friends about it. She had a professor that I met, she talked about it. But she carried this secret, and she used alcohol and food and other things to bury it and hide it, So we both lived this life of this like secret stories that we had, that we couldn't share. And I mean, this is new. This is like days ago for me, Some of these stories that I've told myself are ancient, and they become like generational trauma, And, I don't know what made my grandfather be the hateful person that he was so much that my mom felt that was the reason she had to give me up. But that's part of my history too. Part of my lineage.
Are you ready to do your great midlife edit with your vision of your mom? You're able to see your mom for who she is now. Yeah. And as well as her, I'm sure it was hard for you. It was also hard for her to be with you.
Very hard.
Yeah, midlife is a time, it feels like, where we've accumulated a lot at midlife. Some things you're supposed to be let go. Yeah. What do you want to let go of?
That's one of the things for sure. And then there's an equally complex story about my mother who raised me, who was really a powerful, strong woman, but was very emotionally unavailable. My family was very Like they just weren't emotionally available, you know? And I was a very emotional kid, you know, like I forget what your name is, but you know, like I would cry every day. I was the kid.
Yeah, Jordan.
Sorry, what's your name, Jordan? Yeah. Jordan. Yeah, Jordan you stood up last night and said like that you cry every day. It's a part of like you're just such a deep empath that you feel things. And I was that kid in a family who never showed any emotion. And so it was really hard for me, you know, and it again led me to then withdraw and when I became 18, I left. And it was just like, I'm going to San Francisco, which, you know, you and I know, Chip, it was and perhaps is still the land of misfit toys. You know, it's like if you have a button for an eye, if you have an arm that's been sewn back on more than once, you are qualified to live here. You know, and then you become a barista, or you work at DNA as a doorman, or you join a band, or you paint.
Hang out in one of my bars as a bartender. Yeah.
And so I became one of those people. And the interesting thing is that like there's all these people with all these amazing stories, and for the most part they're not sharing them. They're meaning me, and they're, you know, wasted in bars every night, waiting to see who's the last person in the bar I could go home to have a one-night stand with. Like it was like a time when there was in my life that was really painful because I hadn't gotten yet to understand what it was that I was so hurt about.
Well, if you could go back to that Michael in his 20s and now at 59, what you know now with the wisdom you have now, what would you say to Michael at 29, at 30 years ago?
I would offer myself as a listener. I would offer myself as a listener and an inquirer, because I felt at that time like there was nobody I could share my secret with. And my secret was like that I was this hurt kid who grew up in this family that I felt like I didn't belong in. I didn't have a way to express it. And so my way of expressing it was to be angry at the system when I was really really sad. And I wish that there would have been somebody who, like, I'm looking at me again, looking back at that Michael saying, let's talk about it. Let's give it some voice. Let's give it some air. And it's okay. It's okay. Whatever it is, it's okay. You can share it with me. And I didn't.
You're 59. You can keep playing music for a long time. The idea of retirement is probably not in your lexicon. One of the things that becomes valuable as we get older is time. Here's a question for you. 10 years from now, what would you regret if you didn't learn it or do it now? And keep, I'm going to say a couple other things so you can think about an answer to that. When I moved to Baja, I had a midlife mindset, which was I was 56 at the time, and I'm too old to learn Spanish, even Spanish 1. I'm too old to learn to surf. And that was my mindset. It was a fixed mindset because it said my age is getting in the way. And then I asked this question, 10 years from now, what will I regret if I don't learn it or do it now? And all of a sudden I said, well, I'd love to live in Mexico 10 years from now. I'm 56 now, I'll be 66 then. But at 66, I will regret that at 56, I didn't learn Spanish or that I didn't try to start learning to surf. And so I started learning to surf and learning Spanish. And I'm not very good at either. Mi español es muy malo. Pero estoy mejorando. Un poco. I'm getting better. But so I got out of the mindset that I was too old. Anticipated regret 10 years from now is a form of wisdom. Anticipated regret is a form of wisdom. If I have a regret 10 years from now that I can imagine now, it might be a catalyst for me to take action now. So with that intro, what would you say?
One of the things that causes me the most stress in my life is my phone. And one of the things I know I will regret in 10 years from now is if I don't come to have a better relationship with my phone. It's an energy sucker. The algorithm knows me exactly. Like throughout my moments of my day, it changes things that it's sending me on Instagram or whatever feed that I'm on. And I see the division and pain that it causes in the world. And I want to not be a part of that. But more than that, I don't want it to be a thing where I look back and say, wow, during the best years of my life, I was doing this when my kids and wife and family and everything else was doing this. And I'm guilty of that. So that's one of the things I'm working on breaking up with. And I did 2 things recently in that regard. The first is I made a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to use my phone on the toilet.
Wow, you can do 2 things at the same time?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it prevents you from doing them at the same time. But I was like, I got to do this. I got to do this in bite-sized pieces, because that's another thing that I've learned that I wouldn't probably tell my.
I don't even want to hear. That gave me a weird visual.
But it's a thing that I would, from today, that I would tell my 29-year-old self is, when you're trying to build the pyramid, you're not trying to like do the whole thing in one thing. You're just doing one brick at a time. And if you chop it up into little bricks, then it becomes easier and they stack, and eventually you go, wow, we're halfway there. That's something that I feel like I didn't understand at 29. And so in this situation, I was like, let me just start with that. Like, I don't think I can not use my phone all day. But I'm pretty sure I can not use it while I'm going to the bathroom. So I found a place on the counter that I put my phone, it's out of reach from the toilet, and then I do my business. And it's amazing what's happened is that I'm not spending 25, 30 minutes sitting there. Anybody? It's okay to admit, which has many benefits, actually. First of all, time back, it was a doable thing for me. And then the second thing is I use Instagram for my work. So I'm creating content for Instagram. And then I post it. And then when I'm posting, I'm answering responses to things. I flip my phone open in my finger because magically, immediately, I didn't even look for it. And suddenly my fingers hit that button for Instagram. And boom, boom, boom. And I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Nothing's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Nothing. Oh, that's interesting. Nothing. And it just kind of numbs me out to the rest of the world. So the second thing I did is I've taken Instagram off my phone and I only use it when I'm posting content. And it's amazing. I thought, oh, geez, if I take this off my phone, then I'm going to have to sign in again. That's going to be but Instagram doesn't even require you to sign in again. It sees your thing and it's just back on, you're in. Yeah. So
the feed is not nourishing.
Yeah. So it's that's one thing. Another thing would be that I really want to have deep, meaningful family relationships, because my family, I didn't have that. Sarah's family, she did have that. And
Sarah's your wife.
That's my wife, yeah. And she has a family that was really strong, and not that my family wasn't strong and tight, but we just didn't talk very much. We'd sit down and be 7 of us at the table, and hardly any conversation happened. But Sarah's family, they talk about everything, and they scream at times, and they dance when they have parties, and it's a very different household than what I grew up in. At times, I feel like I'm uncomfortable with that, or I really actually want that. And I didn't experience that. And so I want 10 years from now to look back and say, I've created more of that family depth, that we're talking honestly every day, as husband and wife and as parents, or not to, but with our children.
Because your child who's coming is your 4th. So, yeah. And Cappy, your oldest, is how old?
He's 37. 37 and our day is 26.
My dude, he's finally in midlife.
And then,
You have a midlife son.
I do, which has actually been really an amazing thing to have a midlife son at a time in my life where I'm still really super active. Like we go play paddle, which is like a form of sort of racquetball and pickleball. We go play every morning. We play basketball together. He's into a lot of the same things I'm into. But we have talks, we have meaningful conversation about personal things and about world things that I just never had with my dad one time. You know, I had one conversation with my dad. It was after he had a stroke, and my father was an alcoholic. We had an intervention with him when I was 17. He stopped drinking when I was 17, but I didn't know him. I left a few months later, and he went through periods where he drank again. But when he had a stroke at age 67, that was his chrysalis. He blossomed. He came out from being this like isolated drunk to being this super empathetic, caring person who would talk to strangers on the street about situations that they were in and struggles that they were having. And so one day I had lunch with him, and we just weren't close because there was so much hurt that had gone down. And when you have 5 kids in the house, you don't ever have lunch with your dad alone. Just not a thing. So there I am as an adult, and I said, Dad, it's amazing how much you've changed. And he looks back at me and he goes, you know, son, I haven't changed. And like the trombone of disappointment went off in my head, like, wah, wah, wah. You know? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, what I mean by that is I've always loved you like this. I've always loved your mom like this. I could just never show it. And I was in my addiction, and my addiction prevented me from showing up.
And his cultural roots. He's a Scandinavian Finnish. So, you know, had sort of like, you know, very
stoic.
Yeah.
He taught me a lot of things. Like he's super hardworking. He's, you know, like all the attributes that I've taken from him have been good in that regard. But I also took some of that away of not of withdrawing and being in withdrawal with people, you know, and not fully connecting with the people and relationships that I have. And it's something that throughout my adult life I've really had to work on.
I have one last question, and then we'll do a song. We'll let you choose the song to finish up our podcast with. So I'm a deep believer in the idea that we get wiser as we get older. You know, the raw material of our wisdom is our life experience. So the school of hard knocks is like, that's where we learn things. And that raw material, you got to metabolize the life experience. Sometimes people make the same mistakes over and over and over again in life. And so they haven't gotten wiser. They just keep repeating the same thing over again. So you could have a 30-year-old who's wiser than a 70-year-old. 70-year-old's got a lot more raw material, life experience, but the 30-year-old knows what to do with it. So if someone came to you and said, Michael, I'd like to have lunch with you next week, and I want you to give me one piece of wisdom you could put on a bumper sticker. And the bumper sticker would have Michael's wisdom fingerprints on it. What would be the bumper sticker of wisdom that you would offer to this person who's younger? And what's the origin story of it?
Well, if you ask me when I was 20, it would be fuck the system. And if you ask me when I was 40, it might be have a great day. And if you ask me today, it would probably be break up with everything you don't need.
A song that I think we should hear in a moment because it's a new song that hit #1 on the adult.
No, it's not one yet, but it's getting there.
Okay, will be. Okay. It was on its way. It's on its way to #1 on the adult charts. What's the origin story on this one?
Well, I woke up, I was in Nashville and I was writing with some songwriters there. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, I just started singing that, break up with everything you don't need. And I sung it into my phone and I was like, it was at a time for me when I was thinking like, what are the things in my life that I just need to break up with? You know, the stories that I've told myself. And even though the song is written as a love song to somebody else, it's not really a romantic song. It's just like a metaphor. But it could be me singing a love song to myself. offering that opportunity to myself to break up with everything I don't need. So I had that line, I sang it into my phone, and I sat on it for a couple months. And there was a songwriter that I work with named Philip LaRue. And I knew that this would be something that I could bring to Phil, that he would have some really, he's a very deep, intuitive person. And so we got together and I said, Phil, I got this idea. Let's pull on this together. And so I sang him the chorus, which I'd already written. But then we went into the verses. I started singing about how I see in the person that I love beauty in the scars and the stars in their eyes, both. And that when we unclutter ourselves of these stories of things that we don't need anymore, that beauty becomes more clear. And sometimes the scars become bigger. Like you just see them more, but they become more beautiful because that scar is also that wisdom. It's that experience that maybe you were hurt, or maybe you hurt somebody, or maybe there was something in your life that you did that you regret, and it's healed. It's not this gaping wound. It's something that you've grown from, and now you have that scar that tells that tale. It's like your tattoos of your life, the story of of who you are. And so I wrote all that, and then there was one part of the song. I feel like I should sing the song first.
Okay.
And then I'll
sing the song and then we'll come back to that.
Yeah. Break up with everything that you don't need. Throw it into the wind, throw it into the sea. If there's love that you lost, or some roses that dried up, or something you no longer believe, just break up with everything that you don't need. I see you from a distance, you gotta know, I've never seen somebody so beautiful. I love all the scars and the stars in your eyes. You said I was the first to realize all of the pain that you carried around. You don't need to carry now. So break up with everything that you don't need. Throw it into the wind, throw it into the sea. If there's love that you lost, or some roses that dried up, or something you no longer believe, just break up with everything that you don't need. Even if it's me, even if it's me, even if it's me, even if it's me, oh yeah. I love you enough to let you go. I love you enough to let you know. I love you enough to let you go. I love you enough to let you know. To break up with everything that you don't need. Throw it into the wind, throw it into the sea. If there's love that you lost, or some roses that dried up, I hope you find something you need, that you really need, that you really need, that you really need, that you really need, even if it's not me. Oh.
What else do you want to say about that?
Well, I wanted to say that when I started writing the song with Phil, I said, I had the chorus already, the whole break up with everything that you don't need. Throw it into the wind, throw it into the sea. If there's love that you lost or some roses that dried up, I hope you find something you need, that you really need. Break up with everything that you don't need. And then I wanted to have a punchline at the end of it that was like, but don't break up with me. Don't leave me. And Phil was like, bro, that's not it. He goes, he goes, you said everything. He goes, including me. Like, if whatever it is, and again, like this isn't, I wrote it in a romantic context, but it's a song that I could easily be singing to myself. Like, if there is part of me that is no longer serving this time or this relationship or this space or this business or whatever it is, you've got to be willing to let it go. And you've got to be also willing to offer that to somebody that you love, that maybe I'm not showing up for you in the way that you need me to. And maybe I'm the one who needs to step away, or I'm the one who needs to do that edit of that part of me that isn't showing up for you. And that's like a really hard thing that I've had to look at, for myself. Yeah. And then the other part is the part of the song I say, I love you enough to let you go, and I love you enough to let you know. I love you enough to let you go. I love you enough to let you know. And that for me is like, again, I'm singing that not necessarily to a person, but to those stories. Like, I love you enough to let you go. Like, thank you story that was about somewhere in the world there was a mom who loved me when my parents were yelling and drunk. Because for, 7-year-old Michael, you served me. For 22-year-old Michael, for 59-year-old Michael, you do not serve me. So thank you, story, for being there. And now I don't need you anymore.
What a beautiful way to end our session together. Thank you so much, Michael. Love you.
Love you too.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching the Midlife Chrysalis podcast.